Now, I'll add one more element to that, and that is very often that there's a significant generational difference between a trainer and a client. And the older clientele is pretty much predisposed to assume that somebody younger doesn't have a lot of authority. And so adding to those authority signals can help a younger trainer out a lot.
Yeah, and that was another. I opened my gym when I was 23, and
Mm-hmm.
that was a big insecurity for me, is being young and not being taken seriously. And I think that was another reason that I was really drawn to this field of work. I was like, I need to be taken more seriously. All right, welcome back, Little Jim Big Heart, our interview series, and I have a really exciting guest. We're here with Christopher Carter, and I just met Chris probably 2 or 3 weeks ago in Nashville at the
Mm-hmm.
ProFit Growth Summit, where he gave an amazing presentation on what we're going to talk about, something that I have just obsessively, immersed myself in the past, and he is a true expert in, which is body language and really persuasion and influence at a non-conscious level. And I purposely said non-conscious versus subconscious because I know that's a term that a lot of body language experts like to use. But Christopher, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Devin. And it was a thrill watching your presentation at the Growth Summit. I mean, I really, really liked it.
Mine as well. I mean, I really enjoyed yours, and I was like, I got to reach out to this guy and try to have him on the podcast because again, my education and learning about body language and really persuasion and influence completely changed my life. I mean,
Hmm.
I think we're drawn to things that we have a natural inclination towards. So I always had a good sense that I could read people and had a strong emotional intelligence. And it really led me down the path of becoming an expert in that. And I mean, I'm in my home office. I'm looking at my library. There's probably 20 body language
Oh
books,
yeah.
all different experts that I'm looking at right now. But to work with somebody that this is really your kind of expertise is an honor for me, and I'm excited to share some of the stuff that you're open to sharing today.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, it is really great that you've taken an interest in that. And I hope that a lot of people watching this and listening to this are going to do exactly the same. And here's why. We are so used to our words carrying all of the weight, but that's not actually how it works. How it works is that whenever there's a difference between what we say with our words and what we say with our bodies, people ignore the words and they believe the bodies. And I think that this is so important in any business that is dealing face to face with a customer because the experience is shaped by things well beyond the words. So good for you for looking into this. And I think it's going to be great to share some of this stuff with everybody.
So, why don't you give a background into how you got into this world? You've got an interesting background, and I think it would be serve the audience well to know how you landed in this place of expertise.
Absolutely. So I was working on a PhD in theater, and my specialty was acting movement. So what I did was I help actors learn how to communicate using their bodies. And in the course of doing this, I had to immerse myself in all of the real research, not the pop psychology books, but the real research into what your body language means, how we're sensitive to it or not sensitive to it. And much more important, and I think this is one thing that makes my perspective a little bit different from some of the pop psychology books on body language that you're going to get, how your body language influences the way that other people perceive you. Because everybody thinks that it's all about reading people. And there's this huge myth that if you know body language, you'll instantly tell when somebody is lying. And that's actually not true. But every single moment that we're communicating with somebody, they're taking away a set of cues about us that they don't even know they're taking. They're processing it as you might say, subconsciously or non-consciously, and it shapes everything about our relationship. So all of the information that I'm sharing and that I've shared throughout my career really comes from that period in time when I was deeply immersed in all of the core research. But what I do now is I just make it accessible.
Right.
because you can move it from the academic page into the real world, and that's where it really matters. So once I got done with that, I decided I want to be a professional entertainer. I really don't want to be a theater professor. And I went to work as a mentalist, which is, combining illusion skills with psychology to make it
Yeah.
look like I can read people's minds. Now, when it comes to that, I mean, I can definitely freak people out. I can make it look like I can pluck every little thought out of your brain. That's for show. In real life, what I do is I step onto the stage and I show people how to present themselves with both connection and confidence, because that's what gives us authority in the minds of our customer. When we're perceived as somebody who's clued in, connected with them, and somebody who's comfortably confident, not dominant, not domineering, but just confident. And when that happens, I hesitate to use the word magnetic, but it's true.
Yeah.
Then we become magnetic. We draw other people to us and they want to do business with us.
I love that. I think that's an it's amazing, route to take this because I think it applies to entrepreneurs that are leading teams. It applies to trainers that want to build, I've used the word gravitas, a sense of
Gravitas, yes,
gravitas.
absolutely. Excellent word. And it's a really crucial component. So we've all heard that people want to do business with people they know, like, and trust.
Yeah.
But the most important component of that is trust. And trust comes from gravitas, or confidence. That's simply what I like to call it. And it's the kind of confidence that makes people understand that you really do know what you're doing.
Right.
And once they have that sense, I don't mean on an intellectual level, but I mean they take it in on a deep level, then the trust builds and then they start to like you. But trust always comes first. And the big component of that is what you just called gravitas.
Yeah, and to touch on gravitas, so gravitas comes from the word gravity.
Hmm.
It kind of embodies like the weight and the presence, or the weight of your presence. The heaviness that people can feel or sense from you, and that I think comes from that idea of magnetism. So how do you, based on your body language, what is the mechanism at play here? So the way that you carry yourself triggers a feeling in somebody else. I mean, is that a mirror neurons thing, or what is that?
It might be a mirror neuron thing. I don't know that the actual mechanism is really extremely well understood. We know it primarily behaviorally. A lot of the research that developed all of this really started in the 1980s, understanding what people were getting from first impressions. And what we're getting from first impressions really are two key elements. Does the person we're communicating with have our best interest at heart?
Right.
And do they know what they're doing? Are they competent at it? And then once the researchers dug into that, we understood that it came from two kinds of signals. So we're always sending out signals that show that we're connected to another person. That's literally where the term presence comes from. So when somebody perceives that we're the genuine center of their attention and that they don't have an agenda, then that's the connection component. And
Right.
then it comes from the confident element, when we're projecting signals that convey that we're confident. And the reason that confidence is so crucial in all of this is that we have an unconscious bias to connect confidence with competence. Now, we know in real life that's not always the case. Sometimes people project an aura of confidence and they're not actually all that good at it. Well, I mean, obviously, our customers are going to find out eventually.
Right.
But once they perceive us as confident, they start to see us as competent, and then they're willing to listen to the advice that we give them. So we understand this behaviorally. It's not that we understand the neurology of it very well, but we understand that people respond to these two types of cues.
So that's great. I want to, before we go into some of the, more specifics about how to utilize this, one of the things that I've come across in my learning is there's a lot of controversy on what is real and what is maybe pseudoscience when it comes to body language. I know there's a lot of pseudoscience. I mean, a lot of
Oh,
like
yeah, there's a
studies
ton.
that have not been able to be replicated. So if you can give a summary of like what is the common misconceptions and what is true about, some of these body language tactics.
Absolutely. Well, the number one most common misconception is that if we are skilled at body language, we can look at somebody and immediately tell when they are lying. The reality is that we can only move the needle on a person's ability to detect lies a little bit. And most people are at about 52% accuracy, which is basically a coin toss.
Right.
And with a little bit of body language skill, you can probably get it up into the 60s. I mean, practically speaking, there are training programs that insist that they can get people up to like 80%. Here's the reality. In life, if somebody's lying to us, they're usually mixing in a combination of truth and fiction. And it adds to the complexity. So if you think that you're going to learn body language to tell when somebody's lying to you, forget it. It's not going to work very well. Now,
Yeah, no,
what we
polygraphs are pretty much not admissible in court. A lot of them are
Right, exactly.
pretty inaccurate. What I've learned, I went through actually the human lie detector course with Evie
Hmm.
Pompadour, or I can't remember her last name, but her whole thing was like, it doesn't exist. There is no human lie detector based on initial signals, but it is about baselining and noticing when people vary from their baseline. And a lot of it's verbally. Like if you hear them
Right,
change their verbal cadence,
exactly.
different
So,
language,
yeah, right.
distancing language.
The verbal component of lie detection is really much more significant, but you hit on this one word, baselining. What do we know? We know that when people's behavior changes, it's telling us something. And that is enough to
Yeah.
really give us an edge because at that point, we have an opportunity to ask questions, to dig deeper and really get to the truth or the heart of the matter. So, a big part of body language is simply becoming aware of where people are at first and
Yeah.
then beginning to notice differences. But so the other big myth is that body language is primarily about reading people. What we now know is that it's mostly about shaping other people's perceptions. It's about making them comfortable. So, really, when we want to get down to the heart of it, the things that we need to know are, is somebody really connected with us? Are we in some kind of rapport? That's very easy to tell once you know some basics. We need to know, are they focused on what we're talking about or are they distracted? And then we need to know what we can do to change our own body language to bring those two things together. And once we reverse the emphasis on what we're receiving from them to what we're sending out, then everything changes for us. And suddenly we become really powerful salesmen, leaders, friends. It helps us connect with other people much better on all fronts.
Okay. Walk through, you're a trainer, you're a gym owner.
Well, no, I'm going to back up on that. I'm
Okay.
not a gym owner. I work a
Well, no,
lot with
I'm
people in
saying
fit.
if you
I
were,
see.
I'm
This is a
saying proposing
hypothetical.
it.
Okay,
I'm
go ahead.
proposing, how would you approach this? So you're about to run a session, you're working with a brand new client that's about to come in, maybe you're about to go into a sales conversation. Is there like an internal checklist that you would run through on like, all right, am I grounded? Are my feet planted? Am I standing a certain way? Is there anything from that somebody could run through like a mental checklist of their presence before engaging in a scenario like that?
They can, absolutely. The first thing is I'm going to make it much simpler than that. A mental checklist really needs to contain two components. Number one, where's my confidence? Am I demonstrating the body language of confidence? And number two, where's my connection? Am I demonstrating the body language of connection? So once we've got those two things down, we can step back and go, well, how do we do that? So, confident body language comes from a couple of key poses or ways of maneuvering. Number one, it's the way we make eye contact. And we will generally make stronger eye contact when we're confident. Not intense eye contact, but stronger eye contact. I'll get into the details of eye contact a little bit better. Number
Right.
two, we generally take up a little bit more space physically. So you're right, exactly. Feet planted, shoulder width, or sometimes a little bit farther apart. Body language open. It's not true that if a person's arms are crossed, they're resistant to what you say, but it is true that that's the way that the people we communicate with perceive it. So we
Right.
want to make sure that our body language is open. Body language relatively still and economical. Even if we're a more animated type of person, we're not buzzing around. Our gestures are in a kind of what we would call a gesture box. You're not flailing all over the place.
Right.
So these are key elements that demonstrate our confidence. And then connection.
Well, let me
Yeah,
ask you,
absolutely. Okay.
is the mechanism or the psychological mechanism really understood as to why, if we're in a conversation and my arms are crossed, they may perceive me as lacking confidence or not trusting.
Uh, I don't believe that the neuroscience really is well understood on that. But behaviorally, we know that it is. We know it simply from people's reports about that, reports of, and there's been a lot of studies to demonstrate that people will be more attracted toward communicating with somebody when they're using open body language. In fact, and I wish I could cite the specific study, but there was a study done in a context of trade shows where they had a person standing at a trade show booth, their arms folded, inviting people into the booth as compared with their arms open. And many, many more people would enter into the booth when somebody had arms open gesture. So we know this primarily from behavioral studies, less from the neuroscience of it.
Now, I'm going to probably spit out some pseudoscience, but it's always been, and I hope that you will correct me if this is totally egregiously wrong. Um, my understanding of it was people look for signs of trust. The hands are one of them. So one of the first places that people look is at the hands. Are they clenched? Are they showing? Are the palms showing? Because that would be a symbol of, do they have a weapon? And that would
Right.
tie into like the really primitive aspect of our thinking. So when your arms are crossed, not only are your hands not shown, but you're also in a defensive position from your most vulnerable part of the body, your torso, your organs. So my understanding was always doing that shows that you are not trusting between each other. So people might look at you and be like, he's in a defensive body language. I can't see their palms. There's a little
Right.
red flag being triggered. Is that based in reality at all?
It's based on conjecture.
Right.
A lot of evolutionary psychology is an effort to explain in evolutionary terms things that we're observing in human behavior.
Right.
And so that's a theory that is somewhat testable, but not deeply testable. Do we know that the need for a handshake actually comes from demonstrating that we don't have weapons? We don't actually know it. We think that might explain it. But for our purposes, I don't think it matters. I think the behavioral aspect matters. The fact is that behavioral research shows that people do trust us more, and that deep evolutionary explanation might be the correct explanation. It certainly is better than any other explanation I've heard, but I don't think that we have that level of scientific certainty over the explanation as to the mechanism behind it.
Got it.
But our you hit on something really important. Our body language primarily comes from the deeper parts of our brain, the limbic system, which is the most primitive part of our brain. And it is all about survival. And so we are constantly assessing somebody as either a threat or a benefit.
Yeah.
And it does seem to be the case, again, primarily through behavioral research, that when somebody's body is open, we judge them to have the kind of confidence that says they're completely comfortable with us. They don't perceive us as a threat. And that's where that kind of confidence becomes so magnetic. It's not that when it's this way, that they perceive us as being threatening. It's when our body is open, they understand that we don't see them as a threat. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was getting at. And
Right. Yeah,
funny,
exactly.
you reminded me, one of the reasons that I went down this path myself was I had a moment very early in my career where a client came in and I was asking about their previous fitness experience, and they were saying, "Yeah, I went to this other gym down the road, and man, I can't remember what it was called." And I was like, it blew me away that somebody went to a gym, worked with a personal trainer
And they
for a
don't even
period
remember
of time,
what
and
it
I
was.
was like, they didn't even remember the name of it. And I made a commitment. I was like, nobody will ever come in here and never not remember the name of my gym. And it led me down the path like, how do I become more memorable? And in my learnings of this, one of the things that I learned is we have the reticular activating system in our brains, and essentially we come across so many people and so many things. There's so much data entering our eyeballs it gets filtered into really three categories: forget me,
Hmm.
fight me, or sorry, it's four categories: friend, forget, fight, or the other F word, which would
Be
be
flight, really.
sexual partner with,
Okay.
which
All
is
right, gotcha.
essentially the vast majority of the people that you meet fall into the forget me category. You know, you walk
Right.
down the street, you just don't
Right.
process so many of what you're seeing in front of you. Some people that might be sexually attractive to you would be memorable. Some people that trigger you in some way would be in the fight me category. But friend is what you want to go to.
Exactly.
Is it
And
friend or gym owner? You don't want to be seen as a sexual partner for your clients, but you want to be falling into that friend category. And that's the way you want to portray yourself from a body language standpoint.
right, exactly. And when it comes to really building that kind of magnetism you're talking about, the thing that is truly magnetic is when we perceive somebody as so confident that they're inviting us into their world, but they don't need us. There's not that sense of submissiveness or neediness.
Right.
And so a lot of times, if we're not showing these confidence cues, we can end up looking a little needy. And people don't like to do business with needy people. They feel that there's an agenda at work. So that's why that confidence is so important to us.
Awesome. So how do you portray that? You said open body language.
Open body language, generally emotional responsiveness. When you are responding to somebody's emotions, they feel tuned in. But there's a technique I like to teach. I call it the give and the take. And it really works this way. A confident body language is pretty much upright. You know, imagine that you're at your most confident. It's like Earth's gravity got turned in reverse. All this energy lifts you up, your rib cage
Yeah.
is up, your head is up. So that's a really important component of confident body language. Connected body language is generally a little lean in. Why? Because this shows our attentiveness to the other person. So, I mean, every time you've given a great speech and you see the audience leaning in, you know that they are connected at that point. Well, here's the problem. Excessive connectiveness in terms of body language can make you look needy. So I call it the give and take. The give and take is whenever we're giving information, we want to do it from a confident, upright stance, whether we're sitting or not. But whenever we're receiving information or asking for information, that's when we move into the more connected body language, a little lean in, softer focus of eye contact. And when we're able to present ourselves with great authority, but listen with a certain level of humility, it's magnetic. That's what makes people think this person's really interested in me. They really have my best interest at heart, but they also know what they're doing.
Now, and again, this could be pseudoscience, but would that also lend itself towards, if you're leaning in when you're receiving information, uh, would that lend themselves to them leaning in almost through like a mirroring
That's
effect?
exactly right.
And
If you
then
were,
in their mind, if they are leaning in, their mind goes to a place of like the brain follows the body in a sense of like, I'm
yes.
leaning in, I must be very invested in this. And then there's kind of a cycle of trust rapport
You
building.
you are exactly right. And this part is not pseudoscience. It's called nonverbal synchrony. We have a tendency to mimic the body language of the people we feel connected with. You can see this all the time. I mean, go into any public place and watch close friends together, and you will see them with their legs crossed similar fashion. They're gesturing in similar fashion. They're leaning in similar fashion. And none of this is conscious. It's all happening in an unconscious or non-conscious level. What's happening is that they are simply signaling, hey, I'm part of the same tribe as you. We have same values, we have same interests by adopting each other's body language. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about mirroring as a tool to build rapport in just a second. But yes, if you lean in to hear them and they lean in back, that is a beautiful sign. That tells you you've made a real connection. You get
Yeah.
to use that to your advantage and to their advantage because now they're more likely to trust what you have to say. If you're in that state, that is your best time to give that really powerful coaching. Or if you, for example, want to make a great sale, that is your best time to make a really great sale. So yeah, that's not pseudoscience. That is real. Now,
Yeah. Now,
Let me.
let me ask you this. If
Uh-huh.
you've established a base, let's say you're in a sale or you're in a coaching conversation, you've established that synchrony where you've gotten them to lean in, but then maybe you go for the sale and you notice them lean back or you
Hmm.
notice them cross their legs in that moment. Is that a signal that maybe you said something that triggered them or they, were pushed back a little bit? Or is that,
The answer is it can be.
yeah,
Not every single body language cue means anything specific, but clusters of body
yeah,
language cues can tell you a lot. Nevertheless, every time you see a change, it's worthwhile to go back to what I would call your confident baseline, which is up, open, facing, and great eye contact.
right,
Because that's when you are perceived as most confident and, like I said earlier, more competent. So, whenever you perceive a change, go back to that until they've started to give you those signals that show you they're really invested.
cool. So that's the first thing is I think we went down a little bit of a hole with the synchrony, but confident body language, being open, inviting people into your space. What else could a trainer or gym owner or really just any professional do to influence somebody to make them feel more trusted and competent?
Absolutely. Well, to influence somebody to make them feel more trusted and competent, I'm not quite sure I understand that question. Let me share with you, though, what I think the most valuable things that a gym owner can do or a trainer can do.
Yeah.
It is to make a list of all of the key interpersonal touch points that you're going to have. So, for example, a gym owner, one of those touch points is going to be somebody entering the gym for the very first time. Another might be somebody coming with a complaint. Another might be, this is for a trainer, it might be somebody who is unsure how to use a piece of equipment, or maybe they express frustration in the way that the training is going. I don't know all of them that any
Right.
particular gym owner or trainer will have, but it's important to list as many of them as possible and then to rate them, hierarchy. Which is the most important, do you think, for your business? And at that point, go through and decide, if I'm the person communicating with this person coming into my gym or this person I'm training, what do I want them to feel about me at that point? Actually identify the emotions.
Hmm.
And once you've done that, a lot, but not all, a lot of the body language falls in place because your intent drives the way that you interact with another person.
Yeah.
So let us say that, we want to make the person entering the gym for the first time feel really welcomed. Got that in your brain? I would be willing to bet that everybody listening to this has a pretty good idea of what that might look like. And then we can add a lot of layers to it. We can point out that if your arms are folded, wait a minute, you are not demonstrating that because you're not inviting them into their space.
Right.
We can also point out that if you are too behind, if you're behind an object or something, you're reducing access to you, and that makes a person feel cut off from you. So now, let's say that you're a gym owner and you're training your staff. You have worked with them to identify the specific point of interaction and the specific emotional content that you want the customer to feel. And now you role play with them. And you will be able to see intuitively a lot, not all, but a lot of the body language flaws at that point. You'll just go, your arms are folded. That's not consistent with this feeling of letting people in. Your energy level's too low. That's not consistent. So I think the most important thing you can do is identify the emotional response you want out of a person in a specific instance and then train for it.
I like that. Um, where do people, I think what the most important thing that you mentioned is just bringing more intentionality into how you want to show up. I think
Hmm.
so many people just fly by the seat of their pants and they never take the time to think about how am I showing up? How is my presence? That was I took a executive presence course through Wharton
Hmm.
online, and one of the exercises they had us do was like craft like your leadership presence vision. Like, what do you want people to feel from you? How do you want people to perceive your communication? How does that person show up? And it was really helpful for me to just spend time thinking about the leader that I wanted to be. And I think the same thing would be really served well for a trainer to do.
Yeah, and let me give you a really powerful tool to do that.
Yeah,
I call it the authority likability continuum. And it's based on this idea that we're constantly giving out signals of confidence or signals of connection. So imagine that everybody you know in your life falls on a continuum, a mix of those two elements. So on one side, we have a level of authority that's so dominant and domineering that the person feels cold or out of touch. They
right,
just don't connect. And on the other side, we have all of these sociability cues. They're just, this person's the most likable human being, but boy, they've got no gravitas at all. Now, where we don't want to be is on either of those ends
right.
because especially in modern life with younger consumers, this feeling of connectedness is much more important to them than it perhaps was in the past. They're a lot less about authority and a lot more about connection on the average. And likewise, we've all seen people who are, like I said, they're lightweights, and we know they're lightweights. We don't want to be on that end. Well, the good news is that most of us aren't. Most of us exist on a continuum. So let's call the far end of the authority part number one, and the far end of the sort of likability part to the point where you're a lightweight number 10. First step is to find out where you are on that scale. And it starts with a self evaluation, just thinking about the way you interact with somebody. Are you a little bit more authoritative or are you a little bit more friendly, warm, empathetic, outgoing? And then give yourself a number on that. Now, the next step is ask the people you work with. After having explained all of this, of course, ask the people you work with where they think you fit.
Yeah.
And many times there's a huge difference. You think you're a lot warmer than you really are, or you think you're a lot more authoritative than you're really perceived. Now, that's told you something really valuable. It's told you that your self image doesn't match the way that other people perceive you. And at that point, you have a choice. You can study all the nonverbal cues that signal friendliness and warmth and likability, and you can begin to practice a few of them. And what you'll find is you move yourself a little closer to where other people perceive you. And that's really great because, whenever we're giving off nonverbal cues that differ from what we intend, that is perceived by other people, and that really reduces their ability to trust us.
I love that because I think Vanessa Van Edwards wrote books on, she calls it warmth and competence. I think it's the same idea as
It's
like
the same idea, yeah.
balance
And this is
versus
something that's
magnitude.
been in nonverbal research for a very long time.
Yeah, but I love the considering it like a spectrum, and I can say pretty confidently that in my business, at least, the trainers that are way too just jovial and light and considered like goofy or silly do not command the respect
I'm sure that's true.
people that fall more on the authoritative. But obviously, if you go way too hard on the authority side, just like you said, it's cold, it can be domineering. So, how does somebody, I can confidently say the people that I think need the most help in this from the trainer side probably skew too close to um, the likability side. How can
Mhm.
somebody present themselves with more authority?
Okay. Well, we need to understand all of the cues that add to our presence or authority. One and really crucial one can be eye contact. Now, generally, when we look at somebody, we make eye contact with them. We are looking in two possible areas, and we're never beating down on somebody's eyes because that's too intense. We scan the face. So we
Yeah.
tend to scan the face from the eyes to the chin and up, or from the eyes to the forehead and down. Now, about 40% of us look in the upper zone, about 60% of us look in the lower zone. The lower zone is conveys warmth and empathy, and the upper zone generally conveys
So let me
competence
stop
and
you. So
confidence.
if
Yeah,
I'm looking at you and I'm looking towards the lower zone, meaning from eye to chin, I am perceiving you, or I'm being
you're
perceived.
being perceived, yes, as somebody who's warmer, who's more empathetic.
Okay.
So it's possible that if you're coming across as a little bit of a lightweight, you can change it fairly quickly by looking more frequently in the upper zone when you're giving instructions.
What does that come from?
Where does that come from?
Yeah,
I'm
where
trying.
like what
I
how does that happen? Because is it a mechanism of if they're looking slightly lower, they're shrinking themselves with their body a little bit and making the other people feel bigger? How does that happen?
Oh, in terms of the neuroscience behind other people's perceptions, I don't know.
Yeah,
One thing that I really want to make clear, I'm a behaviorist when it comes to
right.
the science and all of this. A lot of times things get labeled as neuroscience, which are really just should be labeled psychology.
I think
Uh,
neuroscience is the biggest.
it's a buzzword.
It's
Yeah.
the it's such a fake credential. You see a lot of books and experts that call themselves neuroscientists that have
Mhm.
zero, like, it's very misleading, I'll say. Like when you
Right.
hear neuroscience, you automatically think PhD, MD in neuropsychology or
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
neurology. It's anybody that claims to be a neuroscience can probably claim to be a neuroscientist. Anyway,
So most of the research behind it really comes from people's self-reports. And so it's we're understanding their predilections from how they report it. And so I'm much more concerned about that than the mechanism behind it. I want to know what we need to do to build these relationships more than I really want to understand the brain mechanisms behind it. So I don't often know the actual brain mechanisms, but it's not just me. Nobody does.
yeah. Yeah, and I've gone down rabbit holes of trying to learn that, and it seems very inconclusive. So back to get back on track, if you want to be perceived as more warm and likable, you would look from the eyes down to the chin as you make eye contact.
Correct. And if you want to be perceived as more authoritative, you would look from the eyes up to the forehead. The other thing that's really important for conveying authority is what we would call fronting, which is directly facing toward another person. And I'll add another element to it, symmetry. Symmetry gives a sense of authority. We tend to be perceived as more sociable when we're a little asymmetrical. Maybe you got one hip out, one foot down. We tend to be perceived as more authoritative when we're symmetrical. So imagine V
Yeah.
feet. There are certain power poses that are always associated with authority. Hands on hips is a really good example of them. So there are a number of poses that we can use that will add to that. But the number one thing that I think people can do to be perceived as more authoritative is slow down,
Yeah.
because authority is generally associated with uh, excuse me, not, I was about to say confidence. Of course it is. Authority is generally associated with economical movement. So if we're moving generally slower, we generally will be perceived as more competent, more confident, more authoritative.
Yeah, one of my favorite people to follow is Chase Hughes. And I don't know if you're familiar with Chase Hughes, but he talks, he's like, the faster you speak and move, it almost triggers a feeling of anxiety or fear. Like, think of a chihuahua that's like shaky, jittery, and the more you can slow your voice down, your
Right.
movements down, it conveys a sense of, I mean, I look at it like watching a lion walk. It's powerful, it's very smooth, it's
Oh yeah.
slow
Since you're on the lion, since
versus
you're
like a
on
jittery
right.
chihuahua kind of thing.
Since you're on the lion analogy, a lot of times people, when giving presentations, will pace. And if you ask them why they're doing it, and if they happen to know that they're doing it, they will generally say, well, I want to create a sense of energy. But you're not doing that. You're conveying a sense of restlessness and anxiety.
Yeah.
I actually had somebody that I coached, and I asked him why he was doing this, and he said, "I want to be like I'm a panther stalking the presentation area." And I said, "Okay, panthers don't pace. Panthers stalk. Panthers move to one spot. They show their energy by being still, and then they move to another spot and they show their energy by being still. All of that pacing and all of this gesturing, uh, it can be good if you're somebody who's not emotionally expressive to begin to practice more energetic gesturing. But if you are somebody who is perceived as a little bit lightweight, it's helpful to draw that in just a little bit, and it really will add to your perception of confidence.
Yeah, and I know we're talking body language, but verbally that's really impactful as well. Like if
Hmm.
people have a lot of filler words and speak really fast and
Yes, exactly.
overspeak, it just dilutes the impact of your message. So
Exactly.
for those listening, combining that with, speaking less, being more deliberate and intentional with the language that you use is
Hmm.
really powerful.
So if you're telling me that a lot of trainers come across as just a little bit too much on the friendly, sociable scale and they could add their gravitas, those things I think will help quite a bit.
I couldn't agree more. I think for those listening, if you ever have felt the need to improve your presence, your gravitas, and your sense of authority, this would be signaled in my business at least. So we measure what's called the session or the trainer utilization, and it's the percentage of your sessions that are full compared to the openings that you have.
Okay.
And we've usually found like the trainers that carry themselves with more authority have fuller sessions because people are like, I want to work with them because they really know what they're doing. So
Okay.
for anybody listening, if you feel like your sessions aren't as full as you want to, or people might want to choose to go to other sessions versus yours, or maybe you feel like you don't have that authority of the expert coach, I would take that advice on, be conscious of the speed of your movements, fronting, standing feet planted, symmetrical with the person in front of you, feeling a sense of, liftedness in your body language. Um, I think that's a really good little mental checklist to run through for trainers.
Now, I'll add one more element to that, and that is very often that there's a significant generational difference between a trainer and a client. And the older clientele is pretty much predisposed to assume that somebody younger doesn't have a lot of authority. And so adding to those authority signals can help a younger trainer out a lot.
Yeah, and that was another. I opened my gym when I was 23. And
Hmm.
that was a big insecurity for me is being young and not being taken seriously. And I think that was another reason that I was really drawn to this field of work. I was like, I need to be taken more seriously. Now, back to the topic of this, how would you go from if maybe you're seen as too domineering and authoritative, how do you become more likable?
Yes. Well, you begin to emphasize more of the connected body language. So, almost certainly, if you're somebody who's perceived as too domineering, you're going to be looking in the upper zone. I can pretty much guarantee that most people who are perceived that way look in that upper zone. So, really crucial, make sure you drop that gaze. Secondly, more emotional expressiveness. Really, it's the opposite. Pardon me, I just hit my microphone. It's the opposite of all of the things that we were talking about that convey that sense of solidity and authority, but primarily engagement. So, more lean in when you listen and a lot more nonverbal feedback when somebody's communicating with you. We call these back channels. So, more nods, more yeses, more uh-huhs will definitely make you be perceived as warmer and more likable.
That's great. Is there anything else? I know we added one more to the last one, but so more gestures. Is that hand gestures too, or is it more just like nodding and
Well, yeah, nodding, yes, but absolutely a more emotional expressiveness. So if you think that you're too much emotionally in terms of your expression when you're perceived that way, you're probably not. You probably can just simply let it hang out a little bit more. Also, a little bit of asymmetry. Now, I'm 6'2", I weigh about 200 pounds, and I have a very deep voice. And all of my natural body language is really toward the authority end of the spectrum. So when I find myself in a situation where I want to make sure that I'm more connected and I'm not coming across too strong, one of the things I do is just allow myself to be a little asymmetrical. Rather than having those feet planted this way, I will put more weight on one foot and I'll lean in, maybe put one hand on the hip, let the other hand gesture. And I do this very practically because it helps reduce that sense of me being an imposing presence and brings me into their space as a warmer presence. So allowing yourself to be a little bit more asymmetrical, that can help quite a bit as well.
I love that. I think that is if we took that 10 minutes, I think that concept is the most important thing a trainer could do for themselves in their career is start to be more intentional about their the way they come across, and then understanding, even just understanding. Well, let me ask you this: is there something with maneuvering that based on the person that's in front of you? Like if the
Yes.
person in front of you is very authoritative, you
Hmm.
want to match them a little bit. If you have somebody that's, we talk about the disc assessment a lot in
Right.
the gym. Is there like, hey, that's a high D. I need to come off a little stronger with this person to let them know not to mess with me or whatever.
Right. So since you brought up the disc assessment, and I'm very high D myself, the the disc assessment probably correlates with this authority likability spectrum. I'm not aware of any studies that have done it, but since I've been teaching the authority likability continuum, I have found that it seems to correlate with where people are on a disc. So I will ask somebody who's putting out a lot of authority body language, have you ever taken a disc? And if they say yes, are you high D? And it pretty much always correlates
So
somewhere.
I'm certified in the disc, and one of the big, when you're picking up on it, they teach you like the D and the S move slowly. They
Hmm.
usually speak less. So that correlates with the behavioral style, and the I
Hmm.
and the C, or sorry, the D and the C move slower. Their body language is usually more muted and more rigid. The I and the S is more fluid and faster and rapid. So I think that correlates.
But you asked, does how somebody's behaving toward you have any impact on how you respond? And the answer is yes. Uh, by and large, we want to communicate with people who communicate like us. So if we're looking at somebody and they're very clearly on that sociable likability part of the continuum, we might want to move a little bit toward them. Now, this brings us into the whole topic of mirroring and pacing and leading.
Yeah.
Everybody has an authentic range on that scale. Some point where they're just out of their authentic range. I mean, some people are just going to be warm and likable. And if they try to self-consciously move too far toward the authority, they're going to end up looking phony. But everybody has a range on that scale. And so knowing that you can flex a little bit is a very powerful tool because just the act of trying to flex your behavior a little bit toward somebody else's behavior really adds to their ability to connect with you. And I'll use an analogy where let's say that you've gone to a foreign country and you make an attempt to speak a little bit of the language, even though you're not a native speaker, or you're not even very good at that. That's usually perceived as a great thing because they're saying this person is attempting to come to my level. Well, I think this happens unconsciously. We shift our behavior a little bit in their direction, and it shows an intent to connect with them that they pick up on an unconscious basis.
Yeah, that's great. Man, that's awesome. To shift gears to another thing that I wanted to touch on, um, is there validity towards if you are, let me ask you this because you kind of touched on, it's not as much about reading people, or let me ask you this. Is there a feeling, does the brain follow the body? So if somebody is in a sales consult with you and they are very closed off, you see them shift from an open baseline to their ankles locking or them closing up. Is
Mhm.
there validity towards doing something that gets them to open up to build more trust? So one of the things that I was taught,
Yes.
if
The answer
somebody's
is yes.
ankles are locked, if you can show them something that gets them to lean forward and spread their feet, they're going to feel their mind is going to feel more open just because you were able to get them to move their body into a more open position.
Well, the answer in terms of the research is that yes, that is true, but the effects are not really strong.
Right.
However, sales is a game won by inches, not by miles. Any advantage you can get is going to help. So yes, the brain follows the body and the body follows the brain. And that's
Right.
really important to understand that they're constantly cycling together. So that if we change our body language to be demonstrating more authority, we actually will come to feel more
Right.
authoritative. And likewise, if we change our mental framework to think more authoritatively, it's going to show up in our body language. Well, it's true in the people we communicate with as well. If we can get them to communicate with us in a way that's connected, they're going to begin to feel connected.
And I guess one of the reason or one of the ways that I've seen this show up is with handshakes. You know, if you one
Hmm.
of the things that I've learned is I think they call it like the dethroning the king or something like that. Somebody comes in with like a really
Yep.
dominant palms down handshake. If you can maneuver yourself to get their hand straight up and down, you kind of match, you know,
Hmm.
you put yourself on an even playing field versus if you just go in and let them dominate the handshake without the Donald Trump like yanking,
Right. Without really going crazy. Absolutely.
which I've seen is like if they come in like that, if you step into the right, it automatically maneuvers their hand into an upright position. Um,
And that is exactly right. So in some of my seminars, I like to do, I call it the handshake tutorial.
yeah.
And in fact, I think in the program you saw me do it, we probably did that as well.
Yep.
And the reason that I do this is because I want people to become aware that the way we greet people often has a set of unconscious power plays at work. People are sort of jockeying for dominance in a relationship. Now, we don't know we're doing it, but it's just an outgrowth of our natural personalities.
Some people know.
And
Some people know.
right, but
Yeah.
but most people are blissfully unaware of it.
Yeah.
So our goal in sales, in customer experience, is to be perceived as a authoritative but not authoritarian partner.
Right.
In other words, comfortably confident but not overbearing. And so we want to make sure that when we shake hands with somebody, it's firm pressure, but not crushing pressure, and that our hands are perpendicular to the floor, and that we're making great eye contact, and usually, if possible, a smile that will go a long way. And that conveys warmth as well as confidence. But you just pointed out somebody's going to come up to you, and they're going to take that and they're going to twist that hand down.
Yep.
They might be doing this consciously, but they're probably not. They're just so used to taking a dominant position that it shows up in their body language.
Yeah.
But here's the problem with that. They're going to assume that they have the right to take that dominant position throughout the rest of your relationship. And so you're absolutely right. You don't pull them in, you don't try to out dominate them, you out confidence them by taking your hand, turning it back up, just looking them right in the eyes, big old warm smile. And what you're saying is, I'm comfortable. You can't pull that on me. We're
Yeah.
equals. And now I'm putting into words something that's happening in a deep unconscious level. But it's really important that we do that. We never want to put ourselves in a position where somebody has exerted this dominant body language on us because it's going to become the theme of the relationship and it's always going to put us a step back in our ability to be influential.
I laugh because I always watch Donald Trump shake people's hands, and I'm like, I joke like some people know the power plays that are happening.
Mhm.
It seems to be a very intentional thing that he does with handshakes to
Oh,
like
I think it is.
take the upper
Again, maybe it's
hand
a
and
natural outgrowth of personality. You know,
yeah,
I'm a pretend mind reader on stage,
yeah.
but
Um,
I do interpret behavior, and I would say that anybody who does that to us is definitely trying to put themselves in a position of dominance over us.
right.
And if we're in sales, and we are, and if we're in customer experience, and we are, then it's really important that we never let that happen.
And is it fair to say, on the handshake thing, if you have somebody that's coming to the gym that is very scared and they're very nervous, and maybe they come in and give you a, or they come in and they're really scared, and you can tell that, to give them the upper hand by reaching out with an open palm, would that trigger a sense of confidence and uh, maybe feeling of authority in them if they go, you give them the upper hand in that handshake? Or is that
I, d-
totally pseudoscience?
I think that's pseudoscience because what it's suggesting is that you don't know what you're doing.
Got it.
We're always better conveying both warmth and confidence. And remember, we've defined confidence as comfort in ourselves, not as power over another person. And so it's always better. We are equals. Now think about this. Put yourself in their mindset. They come in with a lack of confidence. And you, somebody who's clearly demonstrating a lot of confidence, does this, give them the upper hand. Aren't they going to perceive a mixed message there? Aren't they going to say,
Yeah.
this person's putting this on just to placate me? Whereas if you give them a handshake, that's perpendicular that says we are equals, they're sharing in your confidence.
Got
I
it.
think that's the better way to go.
Yeah, I guess meeting in the middle is definitely a better way to go. Now, is there anything, and to kind of wrap this up, is there anything with physical contact, any truth to just in general physical contact? I know there's things with like, touching somebody's elbow or a non-sensual part of their body triggers oxytocin and a feeling of trust and rapport. Is that a part of your research at all too?
Yes, it is. It's absolutely true that appropriate physical contact triggers oxytocin. It makes somebody feel good. I mean, this is why we enjoy hugs, but of course, hugs are not going to be appropriate in many of our environments. So, if you have an opportunity to use appropriate physical contact, and you hear me use that word over and over again,
Yeah,
appropriate,
yeah.
it's very important because everybody has a different internal acceptance of that. Now, you'll be able to tell from the way they operate. If their gestures are broader and more emotionally expressive, they are probably huggy people. And so their range of appropriate physical contact is probably better. If they are emotion or physically restricted, their hands are by their sides, they probably have a real strong aversion to that kind of touch at first. So you never want to do this to somebody that you haven't had a sense of trust already built.
Right.
And but once it's built, yes, a hand on the shoulder, a pat on the back, those can be really powerful. They're not just rapport builders; they're great encouragers, and it really does a lot to increase their ability to like you because they feel properly rewarded.
Yeah, and I also think there's a psychological, I let them touch me. I wouldn't do that if I didn't trust them or have a sense of rapport with them. A lot of times I'll always try to make a point to touch on the elbow if I'm leading somebody somewhere or meeting somebody after a handshake, be like, "Oh, follow me here," and touch them on the elbow or shoulder if it feels like that's an appropriate thing to do.
Right, exactly. And I think you need to use context for this, and you need simply to watch the person. What is their physical space norm? And you can usually tell, especially if you lean in and they pull back, then don't touch them. It's pretty much that simple. Now, these days, in our post-COVID world, a lot of people have real hang-ups about that kind of touch. And so I generally feel it's going to be safer to let them take the lead. But you're absolutely right. Appropriate physical touch, it's a very powerful anchor for connectedness.
Yeah. Well, I want to wrap up with just a quick summary. So, if you want to utilize body language, you mentioned, and this is the common misconception, is that it's not about reading people as much as it is influencing with your own body language and presence. The best way to do that is to get a baseline for how you are coming across and
Hmm.
serve what might serve you best in the current situation, whether that's more likability or authority,
Right.
and then maneuvering, becoming more intentional about that. Is there any like final thoughts and things that you want to leave people with? If you take this one thing away or, you know, cluster of things away, to use that word, what would somebody be super pumped to take away from this episode?
Really, I want them to take away how to learn this because if you take on too much too quick, it's going to lead to crippling self-consciousness.
Yeah,
And I often joke that one of my jobs as a body language expert is to make people self-conscious for the rest of their lives. It's
yeah,
not. It's really to make people self-aware. And so what you want to do is focus on one specific body language element, fronting people, uh,
yeah,
a good handshake. How do I make eye contact at a time? Because it's like learning a new vocabulary. If you try to learn 50 words at once, it's going to be complicated. But if you try to learn one word at a time, it's a whole lot easier. And so training yourself to do this to the point where it's second nature to you, it's not self-conscious, that takes just breaking it down one element at a time. And just give 5 minutes in the morning to reflect on a particular body language element and then be aware of it throughout the day. Do that for a week. the end of the week, take on another and then another. And that's how real transformation takes place. Otherwise, all you're doing is thinking about yourself. You're not really thinking about the impact you have on other people. That's a problem.
Yeah, this is great. And you had a gift that you wanted to share with the millions of listeners that we have out there. I always
I
joke
do.
with
So,
LinkedIn, not
from
that many
inter
listeners.
absolutely. So, from interviews with gym owners, I have taken down what they tell me are their 10 top customer experience touch points. Remember, we talked earlier about identifying those touch points. And so, what I've done is I've identified what gym owners tell me are the top 10. And then I've identified the emotional response that you, as the owner, or you want your staff or trainer to have from the person they're communicating with. And then I've identified the top body language things to do and the top body language things to avoid so that it becomes a training tool. You can help train your staff or yourself through a process of role playing where you get to watch, you get to talk about the emotional connection that you want them to have, and then you get to observe and coach them into using the positive body language or unlearning the negative body language. So that's what I've got as a little ebook, top 10 broken down like that. And the response I'm getting from gym owners about this is really fantastic. I think it can make a big difference in moving the needle in your organization to where people want to come back to your gym.
Yeah, absolutely. We're definitely going to install this into our onboarding. But for anybody listening, it'll be in the show notes. Chris, you'll share the link to it.
Absolutely.
It'll be in the show notes. It's the first time I've ever put anything in the show notes, so this will be a fun experiment for me to figure out how to do that. But outside of that, is there any way people could learn more from you? You mentioned having a book. Do you have a YouTube? Do you have a book?
What I have at this moment is a website. The ebook is going on the website too, but since you've got it in the show notes, my website is christophercarter.com and follow me on LinkedIn because on LinkedIn, I'm constantly putting up new videos that are about interconnecting and presentation skills and body language.
Great. That's great. Christopher, thank you so much. This was awesome. This was like I got to nerd out with this
Well,
stuff.
you are really into this stuff and I appreciate it.
I am very much into it, and I appreciate, deciphering between the pseudoscience and what's real. And I'm still going to be probably obsessed with learning all of it. So thank you so much. This was awesome.
My pleasure.